Hello, and welcome to the Comedians Powers. This is the podcast where we spoke to amazing, brilliant performers from across the comedy world. Now, today's guest is Sarah-Louise Young. She is a lady that survived 29 years at the Edinburgh Fringe and conquers the Fringe like the female badass boss of Beyonce. You're going to absolutely love her. Welcome, Sarah-Louise Young.
Oh my God, has anyone ever conquered the fringe? I've sort of like made a few indents with a little mallet, but that's very kind. Thank you for that incredible introduction.
I,
I'll try to live up to it.
I mean, I that interview I did with that amazing Luke Meredith. He's a great guy, and through interviewing both him and Peter Buckley Hill, I really like their ethos, and I think this is a thing that needs to be encouraged from more comedians, clowns, all of that. A lot of comedians and clowns go in it with what's in it for me, and they don't go in it when they're doing a show or anything like that. Everything's about them. They don't care if they put on a good show or not. If 10 people have a shit night, they only care if it gets them to TV. Whilst I interviewed one person called Tom Fox, he always says, "Why should people care?" And
Mm.
I know in the boxing club, there's a lot of boxing clubs that help save people's lives, and they give a lot to the community. And I think with a lot of us as artists, we should think about how can we help others? Because if you do a really good job of helping others and doing a good performance, I reckon that should be the main focus. Obviously, you want to be big and famous, but you can focus on what service you're providing and it being good, then other things will come easier. That's what I feel anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't even think I need to be big and famous. I quite like my anonymity. It's quite nice people not knowing who you are all the time. But I think for me, theatre and cabaret and performance is about connectivity and community. And you're right. I think a lot of people, when we're kids, we like getting up on stage, we get lots of attention and we go, oh, maybe I'll try and monetize that. And then we realize we can't and we become performers.
Yeah.
But I do think as I've got older, I've been drawn to work that is about the experience in the room. And one of the things I love about the PBH Free Fringe and also the Laughing Horse Free Fringe, they do work slightly differently, but is that there's a really honest transaction. Like you perform, the audience come in, they don't have to buy a ticket, and they get a choice whether they put money in the bucket at the end of the show. And I love that interaction. And it's oddly the show that we've made many shows on the Free Fringe, but the show An Evening Without Kate Bush, we've kept that interaction at the end, even though now people buy tickets in advance. I've kept that thing of meeting people at the end to find out, like, how was your night? How was your experience? Talk to me, share stuff. And I think Luke is a similar performer. Like, he's absolutely about the shared experience of being in the room. Because a comedian without anyone laughing at their jokes is just a really sad, lonely person in their bedroom. We
Yeah.
had years of being alone in our bedrooms. But I think the Free Fringe is so vital to the Edinburgh Fringe. I'm now on the board of directors of the Edinburgh Fringe Society, which is, terribly official. I have to, look at a lot of accounts and
Oh,
go, it's really, but actually, the Free Fringe, without the Free Fringe, I think a lot of people just wouldn't be able to afford to come to the Fringe at all. It's an insanely expensive thing. And it's where I've been allowed to take risks. And, in an ideal world, you'd be able to come to the Fringe with something and enjoy the run of it, enjoy finding out what it is. But a lot of comedians come, maybe people like with Profile, they'll come with a show that's already ready. They've been touring it for a year or they've got a DVD to promote. And, for those of us who, it's the coal face of performance, isn't it? It's the real coal face.
it's. I think it's a great. I mean, the fantastic Emily Davis mentioned it as well. The great thing about the Fringe is you see so many great performers, and yeah, I think what's going on now with what's the process of the paid Fringe that they've been going on they've been having a big impact the last sort of 15 years or so, haven't they? And I know that in some ways, I mean, it's you see great shows like Frank Skinner and all these great shows, but is the spirit of the Fringe starting to die down a bit with it
I
being
think
corporatized?
I think the spirit of the Fringe is where the people are who are still really taking risks. So if you think like the Fringe itself, obviously has been going for decades, but it started out with just a couple of shows around the Fringe, the festival. And now it's almost like there's a fringe of the Fringe. And I think that's what's coming up that, especially not just in the Free Fringe, but, if you think about it, you can spend thousands of pounds taking a show to Edinburgh. I think the cheapest I've managed to bring a show to Edinburgh is about 2 grand. But, you can easily spend 15, 20 grand on something. But you don't have to have PR. You don't have to have loads of big flashy posters. If you've got a really, really good show, word of mouth on the Free Fringe is absolutely king. And it's interesting to see a lot of established performers coming to the Free Fringe because the paid model is not working for them. Because with the paid model, obviously, you've got a guarantee to that venue and you've got a box office split. And, I know people who have won awards and sold out runs and they've still come away in debt. It's not an ecosystem that really works for. And I never came from the bank of mum and dad. No, don't come from money, never had any money. One of the questions you asked me was about failure, and I have failed. I failed epically at the Edinburgh Fringe and lost thousands and thousands. And it made me go away and rethink. And then I came back to the Free Fringe, and that's when things really started shifting for me. It just felt really honest, and there was a space to try stuff and see what worked. I'm very, very grateful to both the PBH Free Fringe and the Laughing Horse Free Fringe.
Yeah, they make it more. It's great to keep it going, and I think now through interviewing like Peter and Luke and like looking at all these great comedians that build their own way in life, I had an experience. This sounds really stupid and sad and really sort of pathetic and narcissistic, but I had a great surprise happen at one of the shows that I ran yesterday. So with my Zorro character, and I found it a bit of a surprise. Last month at the show I run Rains Park, a guy I don't know how he's able to do it, but he gets able to get a lot of his friends to gigs. And there's a group of 4 or 5 guys that absolutely love my act. So they came next month to go and see me yesterday. And I was surprised by that. And it got me thinking that a lot of us as performers, we're waiting for external validation from others to tell us are good. But if we're always going to chase that, why don't we build a firm base so we're not as bothered by that, by getting good and building your own audience? And once you have a firm base of people that like what you do, then and you get a good living from it, other things don't matter as much.
Yeah, I don't think that's narcissistic at all. I think that's great that people love your work. I think I had a very conventional beginning as a performer, when I did trained in musical theatre and I was doing little bits of telly and, normal acting work. And I think then I was really looking for external validation. And to be honest, it was during the pandemic. I'd created, 17 shows. And during the pandemic, I suddenly realized I had work that I could put online. Obviously, I prefer to be in the room. And I think I'd seen the stuff I'd made myself almost as like a consolation prize to not being hand plucked by the great fates of, the external validators. And then I suddenly thought, oh, do you know what? Actually, I've made some stuff and people are happy to put a little tip in my jar. And I think it was very humbling, but also very empowering to realize that I'd made some stuff that people liked it. But actually, every time you step out on stage, it's a blank page, isn't it? It's like an etch a sketch. You kind of wipe the show back and forth. And I don't know, I do know some people who say they don't care about the audience. But to me, that hour in the room or those 2 hours in the room is the most sort of precious thing that there is. And it's a privilege, really. So you can't take any audience member for granted. But yeah, I think once you've been doing it a long time, you just get out there and do the job. And really anything external, awards and reviews and stuff, it's all a bit of a bonus, really. But I think if you're not enjoying it and you're not seeking connection with an audience, then, hang your hat up and do something else. Invest in Bitcoin or something.
And lose money that way.
Yeah, I'm not here to give legal advice. Definitely not. Should say that, please. Anyone who loses money through this call. I'm not a financial expert.
No, it is. But with when you're in this game a long while, I've been in comedy for quite a while as well. I've been in it about 11 years or so. But the things that keep me in it are the people in it that I've fallen in love with. I don't get on with all the comedians in comedy, but I actually like the people in it. I've grown to love it, and I like the audiences that come to shows. And I'm building a small group of audience around Southwest London for my comedy shows.
Right.
And it's through word of mouth and through the shows being good. And not only are the shows good, me and the venue and the people that I get work with are quite friendly and nice to people, and you create a good environment where people want to come back to. There's a lot of very terrible gigs in London where everyone runs bad gigs. There's no customer service to the audience that have come to watch you. There's no making them feel comfortable and giving more than just a show.
Yeah, and that's hard because it often reflects badly on the performers. We used to do a lot of cabaret nights in venues that did food, and the customers would always be coming up to us as the performer and saying, "This food's bad" or "The soup's late." There's a contract between all of you. I mean, I don't even really think of myself as working in the comedy industry. I did, I did it like a year of stand up and did a lot of cabaret nights and things. Um, and I guess now, like the genre is less important to me. It's like, what's the story you want to tell? Oh, does that fit in a comedy setting? Does that fit in a cabaret setting? Is
Uh,
that more of a theatre piece? But yeah, I mean, I think now like there were a bunch of us, Dusty Limits and Paulus and Michael Wilson, and a few of us on a boat on the Battersea Barge, Premier's floating night spot. 20 odd years ago, and we were just performing to our mates. We just wanted to do stuff, and then gradually those mates started bringing mates, and then those mates started bringing mates, and you look out one day and think, oh, I don't know the entire audience, and
uh,
that's kind of exciting, isn't it? When you think, oh, there are some actual people, you know, with the current climate, some people only go to the theatre once a year, or they might come out to a cabaret night or a comedy night once a month. It's a big expense for them. And when you realise that you're the reason that they're having a night out, they've come and they've chosen you, like those people in South London who come to choose you, that's how amazing is that? That
yeah,
you're there Friday night, that's incredible.
it's something that we should. And the thing that a lot of us miss as performers, it's incredible that they come. And yeah, the thing is, we need to look at is if one person likes the show,
Mm.
they'll invite their friends, and if
Yeah.
they like it, they invite their friends. But a lot of the times when we put on a comedy show, we want the quick results. So if we see there's one or two people there, we don't bother. But we're not thinking that if we do a good job for those two audience, they'll bring mates.
Yeah. What's the smallest number of people you perform to?
At the end of a fringe, two. No, one actually, one. And I did the stupid thing, which, yeah, I think next time I do a show at Edinburgh Fringe, really prepare an hour of where there's no crowd work or interaction, because the chances are you may have a small audience, and if you're doing crowd work, you're going to make them very uncomfortable. And I think crowd work is an added thing. I think the base of anything you do, don't bother the audience too much, because you could have a bad situation and you still want to put on a good show for them. But if you keep bothering them, you're making them uncomfortable. A little bit here and there, but not.
Yeah, you've got to. I mean, I'm a big believer in like celebrating and elevating your audience. And I know that there are, there's dark clown, there's people like Red Bastard, there's Bouffon, there's stuff that's very, very dark and deliberately kind of provocative, and the audience are not meant to
Yeah,
feel comfortable. I personally like the audience to feel very loved. But that's an interesting point because in the Kate Bush show, particularly, there's a moment where I get a couple up to dance. And I've also get some backing singers, and we've never done that show to a small
okay.
audience. But I'd often thought, oh, what would I do if there was only one person, and I'd probably invite them to dance with me. Like there's
Uh,
always a workaround, I think, and that's quite fun sometimes when you just have to think on your feet. With the one person you performed to, did you have a conversation with them first about whether they wanted to stay, or did you just do the show?
uh, I think it was last year, and what I do remember, I had a little bit of a chat with them, and I think I said along to, shall we just see how it goes and see what happens? And then they left. No,
Oh,
it was my fault because I didn't I made the big mistake of doing a show that I think would attract people in, rather than it being something that was close to my heart and resented my act. So
that's
my
interesting.
act and who I am as a person, I don't know why, but I can be quite analytical and smart in certain things. But when it comes to practical intelligence, like fixing a log or something, I'm not very good at that. And a lady called me, they said Frank Spencer does Zorro. And I think that describes my act very well. And I think whenever I'm doing Edinburgh posters or saying to anyone, that is my act, and that seems to be the bit that I get the biggest laughs out of.
Yeah. I performed to two people at Summer Hall on the first day of the Edinburgh Fringe a couple of years ago. I was doing a show called The Silent Treatment, which was about voice loss. And I was really happy to do the show because I had only done it about four times. So I thought, oh, I'll
Ah,
do it. And there was audience interaction and there was questioning. And I did that, you kind of, there's circles of concentration. So you kind of like, you throw your net out to the audience and you think, I'm going to look at these two people, but then I'm going to give them a break, like you were saying. Don't give them too
Yeah,
much.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
don't make them feel they have to perform for you, because that's awful. And it was a really nice show. And I only discovered after the show that one of them was a reviewer and he gave me a 5-star review, which changed
Ah,
the festival. So I always use that as an example that you never know. You should do it anyway, but you also never know who's in. And I
exactly.
was
Yeah.
really glad I continued and did the show. But I think for like a stand-up show, because my stuff has comedy in it, but it's not like non-stop clowning. Um, like imagine Gary Starr, who's one a performer I adore. He has naked crowd surfing and like I don't know, but then you develop the show on your own. You've got to develop it without anyone there. But I'd be interested to see how he'd probably give the most incredibly beautiful, intimate, hilarious show to one
Mm.
person. That would be a privileged performance to be in, wouldn't it?
Yes.
You or me and Gary Starr. That would be amazing. I don't think I can lift him over my head though.
I have heard great things about him. I heard his Penguin show did really well.
So I saw that in Adelaide um, this year, and it was one of his very first performances. And I've just booked to see it again because we're in Perth at the same time. I've actually just signed up to do a workshop with him. I try and gift myself a piece of training every year or some course,
Ah,
just something to kind of reboot. And I saw that he was doing a 1 day workshop on creating work. And I teach workshops on creating work, but I think it's really good to make yourself a student again, to get yourself back in. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it because I would have seen like one of the very first performances. And now, of course, it's, fully developed and realized. And I love that with people who make their own work, who again you've got to put your work in front of an audience before it's cooked. And that's a tough one. But I'm a big believer in sharing work before it's ready. And it's excruciating because it's not there yet. But if your work relies on people. But yeah, he and Elf Lyons are my two clown crushes.
okay.
I love them as people and as clowns.
I've only met, I don't know them much as people. I know that Elf, through doing a short workshop with her, is very lovely and very nice.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, she's I just what an incredible chameleon. And also what I like about them is the spirit of their clown is definitely identifiably them, but they don't repeat a show. If you look at Raven, you look at horses, they are completely different worlds from each other. And I love that they aren't just, I have friends who've been doing the same show kind of for 20 years and they enjoy it. I get bored very quickly. So, I like those things, people who take a risk and go, right, I've done that. Let's do this now. Let's tell a different story.
Yeah. It's what the thing that when someone does it for 20 years, and I spoke to a comedian on the podcast called Josephine Lacey,
Oh,
and
I know Joe. I know Joe. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she's lovely.
oh, amazing! And she's
Yeah.
so down to earth, and she's amazing. Such a force of nature on stage. Oh, brilliant! Great to talk to her. And she says, we asked her two questions, right? One, how do you deal with the big nerves on stage? And she says, I don't want to look fucking stupid. And then she said, what else did she say? Yeah, she says the big thing of it is she looks at it this way. You may know that you've performed it a million times,
Yeah.
but they don't know that.
Yeah.
So you got to think, I've got to do justice for them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm still telling some jokes that I've been telling for 20 years. I guess I mean more like if you're creating a kind of show that has some kind of theatrical element, for me, I would get bored. But no, she's been performing for a long time and I saw her not that quite recently, actually. We did a charity thing together.
Okay.
Yeah, she's brilliant. She's so good at connecting with the audience, no matter who they are. I've seen her work some really interesting rooms. Yeah, she's great. But yeah, it's same with the. We're having this conversation while I'm in the lighthouse in Poole doing panto, and you have to pretend you've never said those words before. You have to pretend that you have no idea what's happening. But that's exciting. And then what's lovely about, I think, pantomime, which I'm doing now, is the perfect kind of meeting place of cabaret, vaudeville, theatre, stand up, slapstick. It's got it all. It's got everything. It's brilliant.
Oh, would you be able to expand on that, please?
Yeah, I think some people are a bit snooty about pantomime, and I think it's a very high and noble art form. It comes from this fusion of, commedia dell'arte and fairy fantasticals and things, but it's it's also evolving. This is super interesting. So our writer and our dame and director is Chris Jarvis, who is very big on CCTVs. And it used to be very much in pantomime that you kind of, the dame would come with her own frocks and her own shtick, and the comic would come with his 20 minutes of stand up, and you'd insert people into the show, and they took responsibility for their own bits. But now, partly because people's attention spans are shorter. We've got a lot more diagnosed ADHD and autism. We have a lot more people scrolling on their phones. We've got a lot more people who kind of don't want to focus for too long. So it means that the way that Panto's scripted, this is super fast, super funny, lots of quick one-liners. I don't think anyone has got a monologue longer than about 6 lines, which is great. But this is a very nice Panto. It really does work for people of all ages. But yeah, I think a good panto is, like I said, it's the perfect medium. But it should have great music, it should have great dancing. It's a very noble thing, I think. I'm a big fan of like old music hall and variety, and a lot of that kind of physical slapstick as well. We've got a slosh scene in our panto, which is the gratuitous scene where usually 2 people, for no narratively necessary reason, decide to put some wallpaper up in a room of the house and end up covering each other in gloop and whacking each other on the bum with a,
That's great.
it's proper like Keystone Cops. And you hear the kids who've never seen anything like it in their lives. I guess I'm just super passionate about live entertainment because, what's happening now in the world with everybody on their phones and devices, and that's great. There's a lot of fun to be had on the phone. But the real in the person experience of being in the room with someone, I don't think anything can beat that really. And I think that the intimacy, one of the great things about the Edinburgh Fringe, is you can go and sit in the back room of a pub in the least theatrical setting in the world and just see someone and just think, oh my God, I've just had the most amazing experience of my life with somebody that with a room full of strangers, and that thing happening in the moment that can never happen again. That's just for you and just for that audience. It's just, yeah, it's mind blowing. I love it. I go to the Edinburgh Fringe to see stuff. Like I'm doing a show as well, but like at least 50% of my reason for being at the Fringe is to see things and to be excited about stuff.
And speaking of the Fringe itself, and I've done a few interviews on the Edinburgh Fringe itself, how has the Fringe changed during your time there, for the better and the worse? And what have you learned to make the most out of the Fringe in terms of putting on a good show for the audience?
Good question. So it's changed. It's got much bigger, obviously. There's a lot more comedy than there used to be. The sort of kind of dominance is not, I don't mean that as a negative word. The awareness of the larger venues, Gilded, Assembly, Underbelly, Pleasance, a lot of people think they're the only venues, and they obviously come together and they produce their own brochure and they are amazing and they have a great selection of acts, and I think to its detriment there is a feeling from some people that if you're not in those big venues then there's no point in coming, and that just palpably is not the case. There are an astonishing range of venues and pop-up venues, and I mean some of the venues I performed at 20 odd years ago don't even exist anymore. So I think, and the evolution of the Free Fringe, the PBH Free Fringe and the Laughing Horse Free Fringe, which didn't exist when I was first there as a student. I do think there is pressure to spend money because, in a sense, the larger companies with the bigger money, and I'm not saying that there's no mythical pot of gold. Everybody's struggling. Even big companies have got a lot of overheads. I'm not wanting to sort of be negative about bigger organizations, but the more the big companies put their posters on a taxi or on the side of a bus or on a huge thousands of pounds awning, the harder it is for the smaller shows to be seen and to be visible. And so I think a lot of people end up spending money paying people to flyer for them because they think they have to. And that's sort of sad to see people perhaps spending money in a place that they don't need to. And like I said earlier, I do think if you've got a good show and you can just get 5 bums on seats early on, and those 5 bums on seats, like you were saying, tell their friends, you can have a really good, successful Fringe if you bring quality. And I don't come every year, I know there are people who come every year religiously, and I think sometimes you need to give yourself a break. check that you've got something to say. Like you were saying, that conflict between the show you thought you should make and the show that your heart wanted to make. And actually sometimes, take a year off and think about what do you want to say. I mean, obviously accommodation is in crisis. There are, it's a more expensive place to come to. It was always expensive. It's just now unbelievably expensive.
There's things that have been added to that. I mean, I was speaking to taxi drivers during the Fringe last year, and they were telling me how different people would just would kick people out during the Fringe so they could double their money, or bar stuff as well was saying that. And then there's the Oasis coming in.
Oh my goodness. There's a lot of greed. There's a lot of, and to be honest, the way I've made the Fringe work in the past is to work ridiculously hard. I'm not alone in this. I know many people who do multiple shows. I have done as many as 4 different shows a day, and that's exhausting. I often do 2, and I'll often try and get cast in someone else's show just to sort of offset, the costs of getting there and accommodation. But it does mean that you're running around. You asked me, one of the questions you wanted to talk about was like things that have gone badly for me. And I when I first came to the Fringe, I was a student, and I used to enjoy the nightlife of Edinburgh quite a lot. And then I lost my voice, so I don't drink at all for the month. I'm very careful with myself during the Fringe. It's an assault course. It's a marathon, rather than a sprint. And you do see people come up and treat it like a party, and they forget that, I'm there to work. So it's it's changed, but I think it will keep evolving. I mean, I'd love to see more Scottish-based and local-based artists performing there. I thought that might happen more after COVID, when we had that strange year when there were not many performers there. I'm astonished and gobsmacked that international artists come, because it's just such a huge, huge risk. But they do seem to keep coming.
I heard, so I was staying in one place in Edinburgh, and don't quote me on this, I'm not too sure if I even believe this, but one of the guys that was there said that he had a friend in there at a big production company, and they had a great show, and the venue actually paid to have them come to go and do a show.
Yeah, there are co-productions, and there are venues that will bring shows over if they feel that they can make money out of them. It does happen. It's rare. It's rare. And when I run a Facebook support group along with another performer, Victoria Melody, who's wonderful, and it's to support female and female identifying solo artists, because obviously a lot of people go to the Fringe on their own. And I've lost my own thread. That's my perimenopausal brain. I just wandered down a little road in my head and was like, what was the point of me telling you that about solo performers? People bringing you over. Oh, it'll come back in the middle of another question. You can edit that bit out or leave it in, and people will know that I'm a deeply fallible human who gets sidetracked.
I will keep it in.
Bringing people over. Can't remember.
But no, I just found it funny because it's funny to see how so many times most people spend so much money. I was surprised to hear someone getting paid to come over and do it. That was really surprising to hear.
I mean, I'd never done the Adelaide Fringe. I'd done the Adelaide Cabaret Festival, and we got paid to come over to the Sydney Festival, and then I got paid to come to the Adelaide Fringe. But that is unusual, and I think that's because we had created the show already. It existed. I mean, the Evening Without Kate Bush show, we made on a shoestring in our living room. I borrowed some costumes, hand sewed some props, and it was really, cobbled together with nothing. And then thankfully did really well. So it's sort of, a lot of people they see it as it is now, and like we just sold out the Leeds Playhouse, and we're doing the Sheffield Crucible, which is a 900-seater, and people go, oh, it's easy for you because you've got this successful show. And I'm like, do you know it was just me and a bunch of 79p karaoke backing tracks and some borrowed and handmade props. So you don't have to it's all like the cost of your show. People never factor that in. Like, how much does your show cost as well? But no, there are people who do pay to. There are people who do well. There are performers who do very well out of the Fringe. And I'm in a nice position now that, that when I take the Kate Bush show, because I've done it 3 times, is I do get paid to be there. But then I spend all that money and invest it in another show.
Ah, okay.
I just keep rolling the money in. I don't hang on to it. It doesn't stay in my hands for very long.
How important is it to the thing that I heard from a great comic who I had on a podcast? He's a legend on the mainstream and on the black circuit. He's
Mm.
called Mr. C, great guy. Though I did see him in Leicester Square, and I think he pretended not to see me in a group of mates. But I don't know, he was going through a mindset. But my experience of talking to him, lovely guy, great comic, brilliant, great mind. And he said this one thing. He said, treat comedy like it's your lifelong partner. Like in terms of keep it exciting, keep it. Because if you don't keep your passion for it and keep it lively, you will leave comedy or it will leave you because you're performing comedy like it's with no enthusiasm and it's not funny anymore. Or yeah, that's what you're saying. You got to
Yeah,
keep it alive.
I think that's super wise. I had a friend who said, we were talking about songs that you've sung 100 times and you start to get bored with them. And he said, if you get bored with what you're doing, your audience will be 3 beats behind you. They'll clock onto it. They'll know. And I've seen performers resentful of being on stage or hating what they're doing. But yeah, I think that's a great thing. I like that idea. That I suppose my comparable thing would be just the idea of performance in general, keeping that as a it's it's like you said, you draw on your personal experience. It's part of who you are. But it's also really important to know, I think, where the boundary is, especially if you have you done sort of autobiographical stuff on stage yourself, like as yourself, or have you always done it in character?
So the first time I did a fringe, I did any old thing, just built a set that I built up, which was yeah. Let's not talk about it. And then the second time that I went up there, I yeah, I wanted to, I just went in. No, I didn't. To answer your question, no, I didn't. But now I actually do have something to say. I think next 2 or 3 years there is something to say because yeah, someone said to me from the course I did in Italy, like that I'm quite a unique person in that, like it must be hard being Marvin in some way. And like I feel like I've had some mad experience happen recently and over, and I've thought, yeah, I should do it. But I thought it'd be quite funny if I did those mad experiences, but I did them as Zora. But
Mm.
I, so I do them. I talk about being Asian, some of the struggles of being Asian. If I do it as Zora, even though he's Mexican American, I'm Asian, Zora. It is hard being Asian. My mom's always making Asian food, but do all of that and just seeing the funny juxtaposition.
Yeah, sometimes having a kind of lens to put something through is very helpful, I think. And I guess it's that thing of deciding like what's available for the stage and what isn't when something's personal. And I always want to feel safe with the performer that I'm watching. I want to feel like it's not traumatizing them to
Yeah.
tell their story. I mean, I think Zora would not be traumatized. He sounds like he would he'd
No.
enjoy it. It'd be great. I think some people feel pressured now to tell their personal trauma story on stage. It's a very brave thing to do, but I think you have to be. So I waited 8 years. I had this experience of having vocal surgery, and it was a big thing to talk about because I'd been advised professionally not to talk about it. Like I'd literally been told by my agent at the time that if I talked about it, I would be, thrown out of the community. I'd be damaged goods because there's a lot. It's better now, but at the time there was a lot of judgment on singers that if you had vocal problems, you were somehow this kind of liability. And but I waited 8 years because there were other things in the story. There were things about, violence and, all the things that one should give trigger warnings for. But I wanted to find the right creative partner, somebody, because it was a comedy. The show was a comedy and it had, a few kind of hopeful, moments of like, oh my God, that happened. But I have seen people tell their own story and not felt safe for them and not felt and felt like the show they've made is their therapy rather than a safe place. So I think it's important to do your work, do your therapy, be safe, know what's for you and what's for the audience. Um, but it's interesting, like looking at Baby Reindeer, it felt like everybody suddenly felt like they had to have their baby reindeer. It's like, you don't, that's okay. Let baby reindeer be baby reindeer. And if you want to make a show about your love of bubbles, then make your show about a love of bubbles. It doesn't have to hurt you to make your show. In fact, it shouldn't. But of course, it can be very therapeutic. But I think like if everything is in service to the audience, if everything you're doing is absolutely 100% in service of the audience and what they want, then you're in safe grounds.
Is one of the things that I had a conversation with is with Kev Mudd. He's a he's a comedian who's had a very, yeah, he's had quite a story. Like used to be homeless and now he's an award-winning comic.
Mm.
And one of the things he said that was quite interesting is when someone wants to say offensive, what is it you're trying to say? And if you can't say it in a regular conversation with someone, then probably you shouldn't say it. And he feels that, what am I saying? Now I'm meandering. Um,
Got the perimenopausal brain fog that I had. I've just passed it on to you. No, I'm teasing you.
I've got it. Wait, um, I'm thinking yeah, yeah, exactly. Always put the mindset on, is this, how I have this experience, how is it going to help others? How are they going to relate to it?
Yeah, well, like you said, I don't know who you were quoting, but that why should I care?
Yeah, that's
Like
it.
that,
Tom Fox.
that's day one. I've got a story to tell. Why should anyone care? And if your unique experience helps other people tap into something, you might have something outrageous that's happened, but it just helps people open the door on their own experience. Yeah, what's the touch point? What's going to be the thing that the audience, how are they going to relate? And they don't have to have been through, the thing with the losing the voice was not everybody's had vocal surgery, not everybody's lost their voice and had their career threatened and everything, but everyone knows what it feels like to feel shut down or to feel silenced or to not feel they're able to express themselves. Most people can relate to that. So it's like offering something, extraordinary to allow people a comfortable space to relate. But if it's just, if it's just you wanking on the stage, then maybe go do that at home.
Isn't that Red Bastard? Isn't that what
Oh,
he
do you
does?
know what? Have you seen Red Bastard?
No, someone told me he does that.
I actually
I hear he's
haven't
brilliant, though. I hear
seen.
he's brilliant, and I would like to
I
see him.
yeah, I haven't seen a full show. I've seen some extracts, and like I said, he's bouffant. He's dark clown. He's absolutely brilliant at what he does. And some people want to go to that. They want to experience the torture, the kind of audience. You don't go to that show unless you're expecting to be given a hard time. You know what you're going for. And it's just not the work that I want to make, but I'm not dissing him, especially because I haven't seen a full hour show. I've seen a 20-minute section. But yeah, it's like putting people in the public stocks. I think some people, we need that sometimes. It's a different kind of catharsis, isn't it? Theatre of cruelty is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
I don't make cruel theatre. I skate close to the edge of naughty, and it's lovely to make people gasp in shock.
Yeah. It's like a roller coaster, isn't it, when you're doing a show?
Yeah. Do you know what? I just want people to feel something. Please, I when I'm do start, I do a little bit of mentoring for new performers, and I usually start on day one, big piece of paper, lots of post-it notes, and draw a quadrant. And in each of the sections are different things. But one of the things in one of the quadrants is, what do you want the audience to say and feel when they leave your show? And we just write, one of them, oh, that was amazing. She was funny, oh, that was really breathtaking. But I think if you have an idea about what the audience experience is, even if you're not quite sure how you're going to get there, and you lose your way in the making room, you can check in and go, hold on a second, am I aligned with the show I thought I was going to make? And that might change, of course, during the making process. But, you've got to have an eye on hopefully what they're exploring. I mean, I want people to feel transported and transformed, which is not much, it's quite a lot of pressure on me, but you hope they hope they do.
You
Or
want
at
to feel
least are.
something.
Yeah, feel something. Please feel anything. Please feel something. Leave caring about something or someone.
Except a 1-star review. No, I'm joking.
You know what? I went to see Alfie Brown. I saw Alfie Brown years ago at the Pleasance because he put a 1-star review on his poster, and he was brilliant. It was a genius show, and he was right in the depths of some very dark depression. But it was an incredible show, and I went because he put 1 star on his poster. So sometimes it works.
Yeah, use it. Like Kate's Copstick, her review saved Robin Granger.
Is it?
Well, I mean, what Luke Meredith said with reviews itself, and Peter Buckley says it as well, they're nowhere near as important as they used to be. And one of the
That's
things
true.
that Luke Meredith says is, you got to see who's the source. Like, we don't know who the review is a lot of times, so we don't put as much credence. Like, if it's, for example, Kate Copstick, she's quite well known in the comedy world, so if she gives a review on something, people will pay attention and may go and watch the show. but that's in
Yeah,
the
like a
Edinburgh
three-star
Fringe.
Kate Copstick is a five-star everyone else. So
Yes.
no, but it's true. And also it's really important. It's what I'm always saying to my solo group. The stars are meaningless. The stars are meaningless. So I've spoken to so many journalists. Things we know about stars. I'm sure you know this already. Often the star rating is not the one given by the journalist who wrote the review. They will
Oh,
give a suggestion. They'll write the review and they'll say, I think this is a four-star show. And it's often the editor or someone else who picks the star rating. And here's the really, really annoying one. There are some publications who have a set number of five-star reviews that they are allowed to give. I spoke to a journalist on a very high-profile publication, which shall remain nameless because I promised I'd never name it. And he said, he included one of my shows in a five-star roundup of shows. And I was like, oh my God, I've got 5 stars. And he went, I'm so sorry. I've finished my allocation of 5 stars for the Fringe. I can't give it to you. I have to give you a 4. But I put you in the roundup of 5-star shows because I wanted you to know that that's what we thought about the show. So, I mean,
ah,
crazy. You mustn't take it too seriously. It's nonsense anyway. And yeah, I mean, there's so many self-appointed critics and bloggers and, word of mouth is the most important thing with Edinburgh. I mean, it can be damaging. I would say, I think I worked out for the Evening Without Kate Bush, we've had like 70 or 80 like 4 and 5-star reviews. Like the show has been well received, but we had 1 2-star review in the Evening Standard. Please don't look it up and give the algorithm any more attention. But this one annoying 2-star review in the Evening Standard from a critic who said he didn't like tribute shows and he didn't like audience participation, 2 of the key ingredients of our show. But unfortunately, because it's the Evening Standard, it's syndicated. So when you Google the show, it's always one of the first ones that comes up. So that's annoying because I feel like, why did you come and see our show? But, in the grand scheme of things, again, you have to just think, what's my experience in the room? How was that hour of my life? Did the audience enjoy themselves? Are they coming out smiling? Job done. Where's my dinner?
it's what you said there is a bit like one of the other guests I had on the podcast, Richard Villa, where he
Mm,
said when you said he says that, and you may disagree with me on this, but he
mm,
says that when you're talking about someone, what's your experience of that person? It's about you.
mm.
Like, and he says, no one's as bad as say, no one's as good as they say. That bit I don't know, but I'm saying that it's your experience that matters of that person before you judge it. So, like, in terms of, yeah, but what am I getting at here? It's if you have a lot of people that really, even though you've got a 1-star review here, or this person, that person don't like you, if you've got a base of people that love what you do and like it,
Mm.
then you that's what matters. But so many times as performers, we chase the approval out of someone that doesn't like us.
Oh, it's so human, isn't it, to knock on the one door that's locked to you? Absolutely. Stuart Lee wrote about this. I'll misquote him in terms of the numbers, but he said, if you've got, I don't know, 10,000 people who love your work and they'll come and see you twice a year, you can exist, you can make enough money. Like keep nourishing and rewarding those people that love your work. And if people don't like you, that's not your problem. The other thing was super helpful years ago, Pippa Evans, who I know from Showstopper, the improvised musical, which I did for about 10 years. And she said to me, if 10 people see your work and one of them doesn't like it, you go, oh, that's a shame. That person didn't like it, but never mind, 9 people did. And you don't think about it too badly. So then by that definition, when you perform to 100 people, there could be 10 people who hate your work. 1,000 people, 100 people don't like your work. It's the same percentage. And the more successful you are, the more people will not like your work. It just makes sense. It's a sign of your success that some people don't like your work. And it's really hard because you want everybody to like your work, but it's not possible. There is not a single piece of art that's ever been made in this entire world, not Michelangelo's David, not, Van Gogh's Sunflowers, nothing that is universally liked by everyone. There's always someone that hates the thing that everyone loves. And I have to remember that myself. I go to see shows that everybody is raving about and telling me they think is amazing. And I've sat so many times in the theatre and thought, oh, I don't get it. I don't like this at all. So if I'm allowed to have that experience as an audience member, I have to allow audiences to not like my work. Of course, my ego wants everybody to love every single thing that I do. But the longer and the longer that I've been doing this, the more I read my reviews because I'm a producer. I have to know what they are. I have to bung the stars on the posters and ignore the others. But other than that, I don't need a critic to tell me if my work is good. I need an audience to tell me if my work is good. And if it isn't working, I'll change it. Apart from that one guy at the Soho Theatre who didn't like the Russian. He can go do one. David. We've called him David.
Dave.
This may not make any sense to anyone if you don't include a bit at the beginning about that experience.
Now, Dave is an arsehole, guys. No, I'm joking. Now, for anyone that is listening now, I want to ask you two interesting questions here. Two questions that are deep with you yourself. So, what the first question is, and this is Fraser's two question.
Mm.
What experience did you have at the beginning of your journey that's mad or difficult that changed you for the better? And what has been experienced in the last year that's been mad and changed you for the better in your performing journey?
So this is to do with performance. Yeah. I think early on I took a show to the Fringe and I wasn't ready, but I just knew I wanted to come. And I put it together in 2 months. I'd never written songs before. I decided to start learning to write songs. I threw money I didn't have at it, and it was an excruciatingly painful run. I think by the end of the Fringe, I had a show that I was about 60% happy with, but it was tough, and the work wasn't good enough, and my marketing strategy wasn't good enough. But to be honest, the work wasn't good enough. That's the most important thing. And I finished that Fringe kind of limping and embarrassed and very, very in debt. I think I was about £8,000 in debt, and it was so painful. And I would not go back and change a single thing. It was so useful. I learned how to write a show by writing a show. I learned what mistakes could be learned from. And I just now, years later, I could look at it and be very philosophical about it. But at the time, I remember getting I think I got a 2-star in A Scotsman and a 5-star in Broadway Baby for the same performance on the same day. And I remember it was 2 o'clock in the morning and I was sobbing, like really crying. And I phoned my friend and they were like, mate, it's all right. It's just the Edinburgh Fringe. Don't worry about it. You'll look back at anyway. So that was important, that failure, because I learned so much in that one epically bad Edinburgh, and then waited 3 years before coming back. And I came back with a show called Cabaret Whore. It was standing room only from day 2. That show got picked up and went to the Adelaide Cabaret Festival. From that, I got a commission to make Julie Madly Deeply that ended up in the West End. Like, I can see all the things that happened after that decision to come back with a good show. That was on the Laughing Horse Free Fringe. But if I hadn't had that 3-year period of exile and disappointment and financial, I mean, I had to go, I did a series of terrible jobs for terrible money, corporates and things to get the money back. Anyway, I'm over explaining that one. In the last 12 months, that's a really good question. This is about something positive or negative, or something negative?
Something that was bad but has turned out to be good.
In the last 12 months. I'm really racking my brains because it's been quite an astonishing year.
Or what's something that's weird that's happened in the last year in performing that's taught you a lot?
I think this is not necessarily weird. I had to cancel 2 shows because I got ill, and I really struggled with that. I don't have an understudy like a lot of people, like us, like you. Only you can do your work. And these were big venues, and a lot of people were disappointed, and people had booked their trains and their hotels, and I felt so bad. Like, I'm not ill. I don't get ill. I'm Mrs. Invincible. I can, push through anything. But I got a massive chest infection, and I couldn't make a sound. And I spoke to my producer, and he was like, "It's a false economy to do the shows. Don't do them. Like, take these 2 shows off, and then you'll come back." And I really wrestled with it. And I think one of the positive things that came out of the pandemic was as performers allowing ourselves to be human, and that sometimes we just can't deliver it and you're not trying to be unreliable. And so I think I really made me think about my age. I'm 50 next year. I'm still leaping around in a red leotard like a lunatic thinking I'm 20 years old. I'm really happy with my age. I'm happy with where I'm at in my life and the work that I'm doing. But I think I just assumed that I would just perform until I dropped dead at some point in my 80s. And it was the first time I really thought about the fact that there's no backup plan. As it was, I just had a chest infection, but I think being very vulnerable and not being able to deliver. And I recorded a really kind of croaky voiced apology message to put online because I know people get angry, people get very upset and they think you're making it up. And, it was fine. We rescheduled the shows for next year. It was not a disaster, but I felt very vulnerable and very aware that what I have can be taken away in a moment. And I think it just made me very grateful that most of the time I live a life where I have, I'm physically able to do my job. I can move around. I don't live with chronic pain. I can afford to buy a coffee every now and then. I'm very, 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 very lucky that the worst that happened for me this year was I had to cancel a couple of shows through being ill. But because now this show is at a point where, when I do the show, 8 people earn money every time I perform the show because there's now a producer and marketing people. And I felt, bad for them as well. I think they got paid, actually. I think I'm the only one that didn't get paid for the missing shows. The other thing is we played Glastonbury, and that spun my brain because I never played Glastonbury. So that was very
awesome.
Cool. Yeah, that was very cool indeed. That was a good thing that happened this year, was playing Glastonbury and going, what? How am I here? Just after the Comedy Store Players as well. That was very cool on the theatre tent.
Wow, that's so brilliant. That must have been
fun.
God, what was the key takeaway you got from that? That must, oh man, amazing.
I think I just never dreamt I'd make a piece of theatre cabaret that would end up playing Glastonbury. It was just like, how is this my life? Because this was never the plan. I was supposed to be doing Chekhov at the National. Instead, I'd do crazy shows, what I've made myself, with brilliant collaborators. I should say that the Caper show is made with the brilliant Russell Lucas, who is my 50% of the DNA of the show. He's not the performer, but he is actually the lifeblood of that show. So
Nice.
credit where credit's due.
Now, one thing you mentioned, that's such a big thing, and whoever's listening to the podcast, bloody listen to that. Another thing that has been a recurring theme in the last few podcasts is how important is your life outside of being an entertainer to helping you being a good entertainer?
Vital, I think. I I got married a year ago. My wonderful husband, who is a writer, we
Awesome.
always say we met on the right side of therapy. We had to meet a little bit later in life. But before meeting him, I don't think I ever factored in. I didn't have a personal life to factor in. Like I was in relationships and things, but it was work, work, work constantly. That was my love affair. It did actually treat my work like my partner, as your previous
Yeah.
person suggested. But I do now. Again, I think maybe it's just getting a bit older. I am thinking about, not to be morbid, but how many Edinburgh Fringes have I got left?
Oh,
I'm tipping into the age where I've probably got less time alive than time I've already had. And it makes me want to work more focusedly on stuff I care about, not just work for work's sake. So I've said no to more things. So I've got a hair in my mouth. Do apologise at this profound moment in our conversation. I would rather not work than work on stuff I don't care about. I want to work with good people. So, for example, I'm going to Australia and New Zealand for 4 months next year. I will be away from my husband and my 2 kittens for 4 months, but I'm working with fantastic people in amazing venues on a show I love. And he and I now sit down together. We talk about, I think it's the 5 Ps when I get offered a job or any collaboration. It's the people, the price, the prestige, the parts, and the place. Now, in a dream scenario, all 5 of those things are aligned, but often they aren't. You might be with great people and doing a great part, but it's the arse end of nowhere and the money's shit. So it's a dream scenario, those 5 are together. But now that I have someone I want to build a life with, who thank goodness is also a creative. Sorry, that's the show call coming in telling us that someone shouting over a tannoy. I do apologise. But also because I think my friendships are super important. The people who anchor me. It's like a police report coming in over the tannoy. This is great.
What
It's
have you
good for
done?
your podcast, isn't it? Yeah, my personal life definitely, because actually I'm happier with the with where the line is. I think I used to be very blurry about what was available for the stage and what was available, what was my private life. And I do share a huge amount of me. And you and I are lucky, like our jobs, we get to show up and bring a huge amount of ourselves. Some people come to work and they only bring 10% of their personality
Yeah.
because they're in a job that they don't really care about. And they're like, no, 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 I'm keeping me for me. But we do bring a lot of ourselves. But I think I keep a little bit more, there's a little bit that's in reserve just for me and my husband and my loved ones. And I don't think I had that before. I think everything was available, all the boundaries were very blurry, very messy. So I think in order to have the resources to come and be good on stage and to be present and to have the energy, you have to look after yourself and just a little bit more self-care, both physical and probably psychological goes on now, a little bit more than it did before.
Hmm.
I feel like, am I allowed to ask the same question to you?
Oh, sure. Um, yeah, that's what you said there about doing things that you're passionate about has sort of come across to me, and I realized that through putting on a. Actually, I'm not going to. I put in a show that meant a comedy show that meant more to me than just getting stage on being better. I'm enjoying my night at the moment because it's a fun show. We've got a good community.
Mm,
But for the first time, I put on a very special themed show that was very much based on. It meant so much to me in terms of like my family and stuff like that with other acts. And that, even though in that show that I put on, didn't get that many people in, the people that came in were really enthused about it.
mm,
And like, there's people in the area that are quite enthused about it. Um, yeah, point is, I've reached the conclusion what you said there through. I agree 100% with that because then if you're doing something that you really care about, whatever happens, I feel that you're going to put more effort in than if it's just for a job, or just for performance or liking it. It's got to have a lot of meanings to you in many different ways. And in terms of my life, in terms of being more personal, yeah, the biggest thing I'm getting more into when I first started into I think when you do comedy or entertainment, a lot of it's about how can I make where I want to be and dream in life for that. But when you start getting a few knockbacks here and there, you start realizing what's more important and you get more specialized in which you should have been your approach at the start to get forward better. Your approach should be focused on what are little areas you can get better on rather than just focus straight on the goal because you can't control certain things like whether you get this or that. You can only focus on getting better and achieving certain metrics. It's good to have those goals, but focus on the things that you can control.
yeah,
And not only as a performer do you want focus on getting what you want, but focus on personal things that you want to get better at. Or like if you want to get better with people or getting more better relationships or something, that also comes into the performance journey. Don't just focus on that. Like don't if your mental health suffering, take a bit of a break from performing and focus on other things. And I think
sure.
if you got other things that are, I think having other things that you work hard at alongside being a fantastic performer and making your career, I think is important.
Yeah. And you know, I think it can be quite lonely, like you talked about your people you do the comedy night with, but a lot of the time we are on our own. And weirdly for me, like doing this panto, I'm doing this panto for my well-being. Yes, I'm being paid and I'm having a lot of fun on stage, but it's good for me to come and be part of a company because I will spend the next 10 months on my own. And I need me, Sarah, the person, the human, I need to be part of a group of people and to feel valued and to make other people feel valued. And I love the fact that there's a community of people at the stage door and there's people I'm saying hello to and I'm warming up with other people, not just me on my own. And that was a mental health decision to do panto, not just a career advancement decision. And that's never really occurred to me until recently, that, how we are in the world, the people we choose to surround ourselves with, good people I want to work with good people and be around good people. And that there isn't always possible. But, even when you come into a venue for one day, you meet three stage management people, you meet a stage doorkeeper, you meet your front of house staff, you meet the person who checks you in at your Airbnb or whatever, and you have an opportunity, hope I'm not sounding too woo, but, to just have good quality interactions with people. And I think that, life's like you can only be here now, like you're saying, you can focus on the long-term goal, but also like half-hour blocks, sometimes I'm just looking at the next half hour. Where are we? How is this going? And like we started this conversation right back, and whether it's in the podcast or not, I don't know, but you had someone shout at you in a
Oh
cafe.
yes,
And
yes, yes.
that was not a good day for him. It wasn't a good day for you. And life is full of these weird little moments of connectivity, and some of them are great, and some of them are distressing, and some of them hopefully get turned into some piece of art to it's catharsis. But I don't know. I want the day. If I can wake up in the morning and feel like getting out of bed, and I can climb back into bed at the end of the day and feel like I did my best, then I think it's a life well lived.
Mm. And for anyone, well, at least, yeah, I mean, not many of us get to do what we love doing.
I'm so lucky. I'm really lucky. I mean, I spent, 10 and a half years, 10 years, more than 10 years doing jobs I hated, but it was worth it. And also take nothing for granted. I mean, this could all disappear overnight.
Yeah. It's now for anyone that's sort of listening now, and
Well done, made it. Well
well done,
done, you made it
guys.
to the end.
You guys are gonna get a medal, okay?
Yeah, and,
Uh,
and a piece of chocolate and a baby bell cheese.
and Christmas presents from both me and Sarah. Now,
What was your question? I'm so sorry I interrupted you.
it's all good. For anyone that, what's uh, what's the best piece of advice you've received that you like to share with other performers out there? And how do people find out about you?
For people wanting to make their own work, I think just don't wait for permission. Just do it. And I know that sounds really easy, but people wait for Arts Council funding. They wait for someone to validate their idea. I've never had Arts Council funding. Rehearsed things in my living room. Made stuff, showed it to a bunch of mates in the kitchen. Is this working for you? You can put off and prevaricate and procrastinate because you're waiting for the right set of circumstances, the venue that said yes, the budget. And you don't need that. If you want to tell a story, even if it's just you booking a room in a pub and just getting two people in from the bar, you have to just get on and do it. Put your foot in front of another. So don't wait for permission, I think, because we only have our own unique voice. You could give the same scenario of a show to 100 different people and they'd all come up with something different. So I think we also worry about being original, we worry about being clever, we worry about being funny, just, make the story. In terms of how people can find out about me, well, the most important thing, if you're Googling me, is to include the hyphen in my name, because I share my name with an adult entertainer of the same name. She was a prolific porn star, and she is no longer a porn star. I believe she retired at the age of 27 to become a lawyer in Germany. She is English. She's got a very interesting array of films. I get messages on her birthday from people who think I'm she, and I have a link to her website on my link website, which so in case people get confused. The funniest thing is when people message you and they go, "Oh, are you Sarah-Louise Young, the porn star?" And I say, "No, I'm Sarah-Louise Young, the cabaret performer, but here's a link to Sarah-Louise Young, the porn star." And the number of times they go, "Oh, but it's you though, really, isn't it? It is you." And you go, "No, no, it's not me. We look completely different. It's not me. I don't have the stuff that she's had put in her body." And sometimes they're like, "Oh, don't be ashamed of what you've done, Sarah." And I'm like, honestly, please, I'm not even a brunette. So all I'm saying is there is a website, sarah-louise-young.com, and there is another one without the hyphens, which you may also enjoy looking at, but you will not find out very much about my performance. You'll find out a lot about some soft focus 80s porn. The decision is yours.
Each, whatever you. So, guys, you got choices of how you can entertain yourself with the name Sarah-Louise Young. Nah, Yeah, thank you guys for listening. Make sure you give this podcast a review on Amazon, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Next two episodes, I've got a good friend of mine who's a clown, Marnie Godden, which I'm speaking to tomorrow. And I'm speaking a clown from New York called Chris the Commodore after that. So yeah, hope to see you guys soon.
And
Uh,
if either of us can remember the thing that I forgot earlier on, we'll let you know. But I think it's gone now.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry about
It,
that.
it'll be a Christmas present, guys. If you give me and Sarah a fiver, you will know, okay? Take care, guys.